The Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is TNS Live. This is that special show that we do on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. You can join us for an extended, exclusive interview every single Tuesday night at 8 p.m. here on YouTube. But then we switch over to Rockfin. If you're not already part of Rockfin, it is a great new platform for independent hosts who don't have to rely on these like crazy algorithms, like, waking up one day and finding out the algorithm changes, or, Russia decided to meddle in how media functions, and it can really shift how eyes get to your shows and how much money you're able to make, so you can produce quality content. And that's what Rockfin is doing. They're not algorithm based. It is like a subscription based platform. So you go there like you would at Netflix and you can watch any show. There are more folks joining every single day. So they're going to have a pretty good selection of leftist hosts pretty soon. But we're really excited to be over there. I've been on break. As many of you know, I was in Cuba, and we're back now and really excited to get into the swing of things. We went into a global crisis while I was in Cuba. Literally, I was at the Bay of Pigs the night that Russia invaded Ukraine. And once again, we are having conversations about our military industrial complex, imperialism, and just how everything overlaps with one another. But being in Cuba, thinking about these things just added so many other layers. I could not have having a conversation today, but I think there's any time we're going to have it, this is the day to do so. Matthew Cole is as our guest today. He is the author of the book Code Over Country, which I have right here. My handy little copy. He's also a reporter over at the Intercept, our dear friends at the Intercept. He's an investigative reporter, I should say. Code Over Country is a book focused on the Navy SEALs, specifically the history of SEAL Team 6. And I'm going to let you talk about it a little bit more, Matthew, but the mythology, is that probably the best way of saying it? The mythology of SEAL Team 6 and what we've been led to believe?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of a counter narrative to what the public myth that the public has been given.
So, before we get into this, I think this book is really important right now in particular because, on the left, at least, we're having really tough conversations about our involvement globally. We have been for years, but I think it's a really tough time with Ukraine for many people who are against the war and who've been critical of our actions all over the world, whether it's under a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, there are a lot of covert missions that we just don't learn about, or maybe we learn about much later. And so people are questioning, as they should, our government's actions, previous actions, current actions, and the media's role in pushing past invasions, past actions, reinventing history. And this is, I think, a really important book to discuss because you start off with the Bin Laden taking of Bin Laden with SEAL Team 6. So I just want to ask you, like, why? Where did you get this idea of looking into them?
Well, I got the idea from people from SEALs who were on the inside at the time, who we were sort of midway through what was then, and what has been 20 years of post 9/11 wars. And there were a number of SEALs who were extremely frustrated. Frustrated is probably the gentle term, and they were disgusted with efforts that they had made to stop what they, what really are the only description are war crimes and failed leadership and war crimes at SEAL Team 6 and at the larger SEAL teams overall, and had gotten nowhere with their efforts on the inside. And so ultimately, as is often the case, they started talking to a reporter, and I was that reporter. And so this book is a culmination, basically, of about a decade of worth of reporting and looking into and studying the SEAL Team 6 community.
Before we get to how you were that reporter, what are the Navy SEALs and what is SEAL Team 6?
That's a good question. The SEALs are essentially, for your viewers, I'm going to try to use layman terms. They're essentially the Navy's version of the Special Forces. They're not like the Green Berets in that they don't do the same missions, but they are a special operations force for the Navy. They're completely separate from the Navy, though. They don't operate from or get assigned to ships or carriers. They're work out of bases on Virginia Beach and Coronado, California. And they were the first of what were then known as frogmen and combat swimmers came in the sort of early days of World War II after a failed landing in the South Pacific by the Navy and Marines. And they needed a group of men who would slip into the water and study sort of the defenses of an island, both from a topographical and like underwater survey, but also what kind of defenses had been laid in by the Japanese. And so they started recruiting for and creating a corps of men who were different than your average Navy sailor. And after World War II, they trimmed it down and they expanded again during the Korean War. And those groups, there were several groups of different names, but they ultimately became what were known as the Underwater Demolition Teams, UDT. And then in 1961, President John F. Kennedy, created and expanded the Special Forces. And for the Navy, that meant a new unit that was called the Navy SEALs. And they were taken also from the UDT, and the SE is sea, the A is air, and L is land, and that describes sort of where they can launch from. They're special operation forces that can, come from via water, come from the air, or come over land, and they are, commandos in any normal sense. And after 9/11, they became the most predominant, the best known, and among the most effective, if not the most effective killers in the U.S. military's arsenal in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. And so SEAL Team 6 is drawn from a larger body of group of SEALs. And so they're the elite of the elite. They're a unit that represents probably about 10%, the top 10% of 3,000 SEALs in the Navy. and they are incredibly talented and skilled at what they are trained to do. But what my book charts is the sort of ethical and moral flaws that they had built in, and that really came up, that really sort of increased and expanded after 9/11.
So, do they come up through the Navy, or is it? Yeah.
So, some do, some, but getting into the SEALs, you don't have to be in the Navy initially to join. People, first of all, the SEALs, what they are in today's world, are the single greatest recruiting tool for the Navy. More
Wow.
people join the Navy because they want to become SEALs. However, it is extremely hard to become a SEAL. It's extremely hard just to get a slot at their school, which is known as BUDS in Coronado. And so, yes, some come into the Navy to be a SEAL. Some are already in the Navy and want to join the SEALs, and they work to get a slot if they can. They have to be qualified and accepted. And then if you pass, if you are able to survive BUDS, you don't quit and you make it, you get to put on this pin, which is a trident that every Navy SEAL wears, and you become a U.S. Navy SEAL.
Who founded the SEALs?
Well, as I was explaining earlier, it's a little convoluted, right? You had a group in World War II. There were several groups that were known sort of colloquially as combat swimmers, frogmen. They did underwater demolition work. If you went into the water, let's say, off some South Pacific atoll, they'd go in and use explosives to get rid of Japanese defenses, or let's say coral. Okay, and so they had a specialty in explosives, and then they evolved into a singular unit that was known as the Underwater Demolition Teams, UDT. And then President Kennedy in '61 created a new element that became known as the SEALs, and they first fought in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War. So there's no single founder. There are several people who are, sort of original Navy officers, and Navy commandos who started the units, but they sort of evolved, and then not until the UDT was formally shut down in the early '80s or mid '80s, the SEALs were the only thing that was left. So they have a long legacy that goes back to World War II, and there's no single, wouldn't describe one forefather of the SEALs. SEAL Team 6 was founded by a SEAL commander named Richard Marcinko, and he's your sort of godfather of SEAL Team 6.
Okay, we'll get to him in a second, but I'm very curious about how these folks in a crew. I mean, the military is tight-lipped in general, but this crew in particular, I imagine it's very hard, as you've documented, to get to have, lack of a better word, whistleblowers come out and talk about what's happening internally and why things have not shifted. Whether it's corruption or just disgusting actions by other members that really aren't held accountable. So why you? How did they trust you? How are you close enough for this group to start speaking with you?
Well, I mean, let's start. Well, let me just say that it's not a group. You get individuals. I was at the time, I think I was a producer, an investigative producer at ABC News, and I was spending a lot of time reporting on the CIA and the Joint Special Operations Command, which was then led by a SEAL named Admiral Bill McCraven. And there were, at that time, this is 2010, 2011, there were a lot of problems with SEAL Team 6 on the battlefield, in particular at that point in Afghanistan, as the war in Iraq had wound down and was almost over, at least the first iteration under Obama. And it came from sources, and I knew people, in the community, and there were a few people who heard some of the things that I was working on in terms of the Joint Special Operations Command and doing some reporting on Blackwater. And through discussions, I started to learn about, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything about SEAL Team 6. I mean, I knew that they were this elite secret unit, but it had not been something that I had spent any time reporting on. But as I learned and as people started sharing, what they were sharing was very troubling. And it very much was of a mind of, look, the press needs to know and needs to be able to make public what our SEAL Team 6 and Navy SEAL leadership refuses to deal with or acknowledge, which are these serious problems inside. So, it built over time that way. And yes, there is a huge a blanket of secrecy. And in fact, the book is called Code Over Country. And, you could describe SEAL Team 6 and the SEALs in general as having, similar to what you described with the police, a code, a blue code of, a code of silence, a blue wall of silence. And it's very similar, except that in their world, everything is classified. Most of it is classified on national security grounds. So, you just do it bit by bit. And over time, there was a very disturbing picture that emerged that I thought needed to be told.
We're going to take a really quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that you've learned and you've reported on. That is pretty jarring, to say the least, and see if there's any sort of results that have come about in reporting this work. So we'll be right back. Move over to rockfin.com/Nomiki. We're going to continue our conversation with Matthew Cole, who is the author of Code Over Country, The Tragedy and Corruption of SEAL Team 6. It is out right now, bold type books. You can go there, go directly to source as usual, and join us over at rockfin.com/Nomiki. We'll be back in 1 minute.